Look, I need you to be honest with yourself for a second. You're in your 30s now. You've got maybe a decent job. You're making more money than you did in your 20s. And yet, you still feel broke. You see your friends buying houses. Some of them are talking about retiring early. And you're sitting there thinking, where did I go wrong? You're making $50, $60, maybe even $70,000 a year. And somehow, you still can't seem to get ahead. And here's the really messed up part. You thought your 30s would be different. You thought by now you'd have it all figured out. Well, here's the thing. Your 30s are either going to be the decade that sets you up for life, or the decade where you fall so far behind that catching up becomes nearly impossible. My name is Prosper, and I spend way too much time thinking about how people completely waste their 30s financially. If you're someone who's looked at your bank account recently and thought, I should have way more money than this by now, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because what I'm about to share with you are the exact milestones that separate people who retire comfortably from people who work until they're 75. So let's talk about your 30s. Think of this decade like you're a medieval knight who just finished training. Your 20s? That was boot camp. You were learning how to hold a sword, how to ride a horse, making rookie mistakes. But now you're supposed to be out there conquering territories, building your castle, securing your kingdom. The problem is, most people spend their 30s fighting the wrong battles. Milestone number 1. Get your net worth to at least 1 year of your income. Here's what most people don't realize. By the time you're 35, your net worth should be at minimum equal to 1 full year of your gross income. So if you're making $60,000 a year, you should have at least $60,000 in net worth. That's your house equity, your retirement accounts, your savings, minus your debts. Now you might be thinking, Prosper, that sounds impossible. I've got student loans. I've got a car payment. I've got credit card debt. Look, I get it. According to a 2024 Federal Reserve study, the median net worth for Americans aged 30 to 34 is only about $35,000. For 35 to 39, it's closer to $60,000, which means half of people in their 30s aren't even hitting this basic milestone. And here's the math that should terrify you. If you're 32 years old and your net worth is $15,000 and you want to retire at 65 with $1 million, you need to save about $25,000 per year, assuming a 7% return. $25,000 per year. That's not happening on a $60,000 salary. But if you hit that 1 year income milestone by 35, now you've got a foundation. Now compound interest actually starts working for you instead of against you. Here's the thing. Getting to this milestone isn't about making more money, though that helps. It's about a fundamental psychological shift. You have to stop thinking like a peasant and start thinking like a lord building an estate. Peasants think week to week, paycheck to paycheck. Lords think in decades. They think about what they're passing down to the next generation. Let me give you a concrete example. 2 people, both making $55,000 a year. Person A spends everything they make. Nice apartment, new car, eats out 4 times a week, takes expensive vacations. Their net worth at 35? Maybe $10,000, probably less. Person B lives in a slightly cheaper apartment, drives a used car, meal preps, takes 1 modest vacation a year. They're putting 15% of their income toward retirement and aggressively paying down debt. $80,000. Maybe more. Same income. $70,000 difference in net worth. That's not about luck. That's about choices. Milestone number 2. Eliminate all high-interest debt. This is where it gets really interesting, because this milestone is the literal dragon you need to slay before you can build anything meaningful. Credit card debt, personal loans, car loans with interest rates above 5%. All of it needs to be gone by the time you're 35. And I mean completely gone. Here's why. The average credit card interest rate right now is about 22% according to the Federal Reserve. 22%. Do you know how hard it is to build wealth when you're paying 22% interest on debt? It's like trying to fill a bathtub while someone's got the drain open. Let's do the math. Say you've got $8,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest, and you're making minimum payments of about $200 a month. You know how long it takes you to pay that off? Over 6 years. You know how much you'll pay in total? Over $14,000. You're paying $6,000 in interest alone. That's $6,000 that could have gone into investments that would have grown into $20,000 by the time you retire. Now multiply that by the fact that the average American in their 30s carries about $6,000 in credit card debt, plus a $30,000 car loan, plus often $100,000 or more in student loans. The interest payments alone are keeping you poor. Look, here's the psychological shift you need to make. Debt in your 30s isn't normal. It's not just part of life. It's a choice. And it's the wrong choice. Medieval lords didn't build their wealth by owing money to everyone in the kingdom. They built it by owning assets and collecting revenue. Now you might be thinking, but Prosper, what about my mortgage? That's debt. A mortgage is different if, and this is a big if, you can actually afford a house and you're not house poor. We'll get to that. But credit cards, car loans, that's just burning money. Milestone number 3, have a 6-month emergency fund. This one is non-negotiable, and yet according to a 2024 Bankrate survey, only about 40% of Americans could cover a $1,000 emergency with their savings. $1,000. That's not even a real emergency. That's a car repair. Here's what most people don't realize. The reason you feel financially stressed all the time isn't because you don't make enough money. It's because you're always one unexpected expense away from disaster. Your car breaks down, you need dental work, you lose your job. Any of these things can completely destroy your finances if you don't have a cushion. Your 30s need to be the decade where you build that cushion. 6 months of expenses, not income expenses, sitting in a high-yield savings account where you can access it immediately if needed. Let's say your monthly expenses are $3,500. That's rent, food, utilities, insurance, everything. 6 months is $21,000. That sounds like a lot, right? But here's the thing. Once you have it, your entire relationship with money changes. You stop making decisions from a place of fear. You stop taking jobs you hate because you're terrified of being unemployed for 2 weeks. You stop staying in toxic relationships because you can't afford to move out. You have options. And having options is what wealth actually is. Think of it like this. In medieval times, castles had granaries. They stored grain in case of sieges, famines, bad harvests. They didn't store grain because they were paranoid. They stored it because they understood that security comes from preparation. Your emergency fund is your granary. The math here is simple. If you save $500 a month, you'll have that 6-month fund in 42 months, 3.5 years. If you're 31 when you start, you'll have it by 35. Start later, it takes longer. But it has to get done. Milestone number 4. Be investing 15 to 20% of your gross income for retirement. Okay, this is where most people completely screw up their 30s. So pay attention. Here's the thing. Your 30s are the most important decade for retirement savings because of compound interest. $1 invested at 30 becomes about $10 by 65 at a 7% return. $1 invested at 40 becomes about $5. $1 invested at 50 becomes about $2.50. You see what's happening? Every year you wait, you're literally cutting your money's growth potential in half. This is why starting in your 30s versus your 40s is the difference between retiring comfortably and working until you die. According to Fidelity, you should have 1 times your salary saved by 30, 3 times by 40. But here's what they're not telling you. To get from 1 times to 3 times in 10 years, you need to be saving 15 to 20% of your income every single year. Let me give you the real numbers. Let's say you're 30, making $60,000 a year, and you have $60,000 saved for retirement. If you invest 15% of your income, $9,000 per year, with a 7% average return, by age 65, you'll have about $2 million. But if you only invest 10%, you'll have about $1.4 million. That 5% difference, $3,000 a year, costs you $600,000 in retirement. Now you might be thinking, Prosper, I can't afford to save 15%. I've got bills. I've got debt. I've got a life. Look, this is the psychological shift. You can't afford not to save 15%. Because what's your alternative? Work until you're 75? Live on Social Security, which pays the average retiree about $19,000 a year? Die broke? Here's what you do. Treat retirement savings like a bill that comes before everything else. You get paid, 15% goes immediately into your 401k or IRA, and you live on what's left. You don't see it. You don't touch it. You don't think about it. It's not your money anymore. It's future you's money. And future you is going to thank you for not being an idiot about this. Milestone number 5. Develop at least 1 additional income stream. This is where it gets really interesting, because this milestone separates people who just survive their 30s from people who thrive. Here's what most people don't realize. Relying on a single income source is the riskiest financial position you can be in. You lose your job. You lose 100% of your income. You have 2 income streams. You lose 1. You've still got 50%. Basic math. But somehow nobody thinks about it this way. Your 30s need to be the decade where you develop a side hustle, a freelance skill, a small business, investment income, something that brings in money outside of your day job. Let me be clear. I'm not talking about working 80 hours a week. I'm talking about building systems that generate income. Maybe you learn a skill like graphic design or copywriting and take on a few clients. Maybe you buy a rental property that generates cash flow. Maybe you build a YouTube channel or a blog that eventually generates ad revenue. Maybe you invest in dividend stocks that pay you quarterly. The specific method doesn't matter as much as the principle. Wealthy people have multiple income streams. According to Thomas Corley's research on millionaires, 65% of wealthy people have at least 3 streams of income. Your job, your side hustle, and your investments. That's 3 streams right there. And here's the psychological shift. You're not doing this because you're desperate for money. You're doing this because you're building a kingdom, and kingdoms have multiple sources of revenue. They don't just rely on one crop. They've got farmland, they've got trade routes, they've got taxes, they've got tributes. Diversification isn't just smart, It's how you build something that lasts. Let's do the math. Say your main job pays you $60,000 a year. You develop a side hustle that brings in an extra $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year. If you invest that entire $12,000 every year from age 32 to 65 with a 7% return, that's over $1 million just from your side income. $1 million. From what you did on nights and weekends in your 30s. Milestone number 6. Understand your true hourly rate and time value. This milestone is different because it's not about a number. It's about a fundamental shift in how you think about your time and money. Here's the thing. Most people in their 30s still think like they did in their 20s. They'll spend 3 hours driving across town to save $20 on something. They'll waste entire evenings doing tasks they could pay someone $15 to do. They value money over time. But here's what you need to understand. Your 30s are the decade where this equation flips. Time becomes more valuable than money, because you can always make more money, but you can't make more time. Let's say you make $60,000 a year. You work 50 hours a week when you count commute and everything else. And you work 50 weeks a year. That's 2,500 hours. Your true hourly rate is about $24 per hour. Now, any task that you can outsource for less than $24 per hour, you should outsource it. Mowing your lawn? Hire someone. Cleaning your house? Hire someone. Doing your taxes? Hire an accountant. Because every hour you save is an hour you can spend either earning more money or developing skills that will earn you more money in the future. Think about it like a medieval lord. Lords didn't plow their own fields or cook their own meals, not because they were lazy, but because their time was better spent managing the estate, making strategic decisions, forming alliances. They understood leverage. This is the psychological shift. Stop being your own peasant. Your 30s are for building leverage, not for doing everything yourself because you're trying to save $30. Milestone number 7. Own real assets that appreciate or generate income. This is big, so stay with me. By the time you're 38, 39, you should own at least one real asset. And I don't mean a car. Cars are depreciating assets that cost you money. I mean something that either increases in value or generates income. A house, a rental property, a small business, index funds that pay dividends, something real. Here's what most people don't realize. Wealth isn't built through salary. It's built through asset ownership. Your salary keeps you alive. Your assets make you wealthy. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the median net worth for homeowners is about $300,000. For renters, $4,200. 300,000 versus 4,200. That's not a typo. That's the difference between owning assets and not owning assets. Now look, I'm not saying you have to buy a house. What I'm saying is you need to own something that builds equity. Maybe it's a house. Maybe it's a portfolio of stocks and ETFs. Maybe it's a business. But you need to own something. Let's do the math on real estate specifically, because it's the most common wealth-building asset. Say you buy a modest house in your early 30s for $300,000. You put down $20,000. You get a 30-year mortgage at 6%. Your payment is about $1,700 a month, which in many markets is comparable to rent. Fast forward to when you're 65. That house is now paid off. And assuming 3% annual appreciation, it's worth about $700,000. You turn $20,000 into $700,000. That's the power of asset ownership. But here's the key. You have to buy something you can actually afford. If you're spending 50% of your income on your mortgage, you're house poor. And that's not building wealth. That's financial suicide. Think of it this way. Medieval wealth was based on land ownership. Owning land meant you could farm it, rent it out, extract resources from it. It generated value. Renting meant you were at the mercy of whoever owned the land. Same principle applies today. Now you might be thinking, Prosper, this all sounds great, but I'm already 34 and I haven't done any of this. Am I screwed? Look, here's the truth. No, you're not screwed, but you're behind, and you need to acknowledge that. You can't waste another year making excuses. The best time to start building wealth was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now, today, the second. Here's what you do. You pick 3 of these milestones and you attack them with everything you've got. You eliminate your high-interest debt, you start investing 15%, and you build your emergency fund. Those 3 things alone will put you ahead of 80% of people your age. But you have to actually do it. You can't just watch this video, think that's nice, and then go right back to spending $200 a week on DoorDash and wondering why you're broke. Here's the thing that nobody wants to tell you. Your 30s are when the gap becomes permanent. The people who do these things in their 30s, they retire at 55, 60, live comfortably, travel, have options. The people who don't, they work until they're 75. They stress about money their entire lives, and they die with nothing to leave their kids. I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. According to research from the National Institute on Retirement Security, nearly half of Americans have nothing saved for retirement. Nothing. And most of those people are in their 50s and 60s now, which means they were in their 30s 20 or 30 years ago not doing any of this. Don't let that be you. Your 30s are your kingdom-building years. This is when you lay the foundation for everything that comes after. You can either spend this decade consuming, buying stuff, impressing people, living for right now, or you can spend it building something that lasts. Look, I'm not going to tell you this is easy. Building wealth in your 30s requires sacrifice. It requires saying no to things your friends are saying yes to. It requires driving a used car while your coworker gets a brand new BMW. It requires staying in on Friday night to work on your side hustle while everyone else is out spending money they don't have. But here's what I will tell you. It's worth it. Because 10 years from now, when you're in your 40s with a net worth of $300,000, no debt, multiple income streams, and actual financial security, you're going to look back at these sacrifices and realize they weren't sacrifices at all. They were investments in yourself. So hit these milestones, build your castle, secure your kingdom, and stop living like a peasant when you have the potential to be a lord. If this video helped you, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, and drop a comment below telling me which milestone you're focusing on first. I'll see you in the next one.